Hello Crafty Llamas. So in this video I'll be showing you how to do a ribbing using the combination continental knitting style. So for this video I've just got myself a big ball of double knit yarn. I've cast on 20 stitches using the thumb cast on method. And then I have my needles, so I'm just using 3.75mm in the higher 5-inch bamboo. And then I've got a nice long cable just because that's what I find easiest for showing these things. So, get my working yarn in that hand here. So after you've just cast on, this is often used for like jumpers, the ribbing, and that just allows a stretchy fabric at the bottom. So obviously most patterns will tell you whether you start with a knit 2 or a purl 2. I'm going to start with knit 2. So I'm just going to knit 2 stitches like so. And then the next one is going to be purl 2 stitches. So the thing that I always remember is not to, when you're going from your knit stitches to your purl stitches and purl to knit, is not to pull too tightly. If you pull really tightly, what happens is you'll actually end up creating extra tension on your knit stitches, which makes your ribbing quite untidy, and it'll just look like your knit stitches are God, I cast on tightly. It'll make it look like your knit stitches are kind of stretching too much and they'll pull apart a little bit, which looks a little bit untidy. So I'll do this first row of ribbing and then we'll have a look at the rib, and then we will take a look to see what I mean by that. Some top tips when you're doing ribbing is to always put a stitch marker on the right side of your work. I tend to just recommend this in general, to always, no matter what you're doing, always put a stitch marker on the right side of your work. You can literally just pop it through any of the stitches, and I always use coloured ones. So for example, I use like a green or a blue to suggest that's the right side. And for example, you could use a red to signify the wrong side. So I've just realised that I'm actually cast on 21 stitches, so I'm just going to purl the last 3 instead of doing it the other way around, just so that we've got something more even. There we go. So I've purled the last 3 of those stitches, and so this is the right side of my work. Actually no, that's the wrong side of my work. Goodness me, I'm getting myself confused. See, I need a stitch marker to remind me. It's not going to be too clear at the moment, the rib yet, so we'll do one more row and I'll come back to you once I've done that, and we can have a look to see how that ribbing is looking. So I'm going to do a couple of my ribbing stitches, a couple of my purl stitches particularly tight after my knit one, so I can show you what I mean by if your tension is too tight between when changing from your knit to your purl stitches, and how that can affect the way your ribbing looks. My top tip, and this is only something that I probably only realised the other day when I was working on a ribbed v-neck t-shirt, and so I'm doing a lot of ribbing. In fact, the whole thing is ribbed, and I noticed that at the beginning my stitches weren't particularly neat, and I thought, oh, they look a little bit almost baggy, so I was like, okay, well I'll try tightening up, and it made it worse. And so what I realised was actually it's that I'm pulling the yarn too tight when I'm going from my knit to my purl stitches, which is causing them to pull, and just causing quite an untidy looking rib, which I'm not too happy about because there's a lot of it, and sometimes it can be really obvious if your ribbing is untidy. So if we bring this up and let it focus, here we are. So as you can tell here, I've got my knits, my purl stitches, and then my knit ones there. So what you can see is I've pulled really tightly between the transition between this knit stitch here and the purl stitch next to it, and what it has done is it has it has literally pulled those kind of knit sections apart. So in the next row, that's going to look really gappy in those knit stitches, and it's going to look really untidy. Whereas further on, where I've been a lot looser changing between, you can see the V is kind of forward facing. Whereas if we go back to this one here, it's almost on its side and it's not that obvious that it's a knit stitch, whereas in comparison to this one here. So I'll do one more row and then we'll have another look at it. But honestly, it really is just about keeping your tension nice and even and not pulling too tightly when you're going from your knit stitch to your purl stitch. And it is just about kind of bearing that in mind. And once again, this is only something that I realised the other day, and I've been knitting for kind of 10 plus years. So it can take a little while to realise that that's where you're going wrong. So hopefully this will give you a bit of a leg up, whereas I kind of had to find out the hard way. Right, so let's have a quick look at this. So I've just done 3 rows of ribbing. So what you'll get is, you can see here, there's a, especially if I put my finger behind it, there's a little black gap there, well, a dark gap between those knit stitches. And that is because I have been really tight with that stitch. So it's pulled it apart. And that's what I mean, is that these V, the legs of the V, which, let me zoom in a little bit more for you. So what I mean is that it's these V's here that we're looking at, which get pulled apart when your tension is too tight when you're transitioning from your purl stitches to your knit stitches. So you can see these all kind of look nice and V-like, and then you get one here which is quite gappy in comparison, and it genuinely is, it's quite a considerable gap there that you can see, and that is just because I have pulled too tight when going between the two. So it's just quite important when you're doing ribbing to try and keep your tension nice and even, and to make sure that you're trying to that you're not pulling too tight when you're going between the two. But do give it a go yourself. Certain yarns show it up more clearly than others. So that's it for this week's video, in which I've shown you how to do ribbed knitting in the combination knitting style. If you have enjoyed this video, please let me know by commenting below and liking it. And if you have any other tips, feel free to pop them down below. I'm always looking for more tips, and I'm sure everyone else will love to read your suggestions. Our social media handle is Crafty Llama UK, so you can find us on various platforms using that. Please do tag me in anything that you attempt using this video, and let me know if it's helpful. And of course, you can purchase the knitting needles and cables that I've used today from my Etsy shop, which I will link below. That's it for this week's video, but I'll be back with you next week for another one. Bye!